Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Today on the show, I speak with David Brower. David is an American in Paris, but he's been here for over 30 years. He specializes in helping people find themselves. His new movement called Alivefulness talks about how we can reconnect with our bodies, with our creativity, our different types of intelligence. We have so much to cover today on the show, so I hope you guys enjoy. So welcome to the show, David. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Crystal. This is going to be fun.
It's lovely to speak with you because you are helping people in so many ways. I think what you're doing, a lot of us need, especially in today's world with everything going on. But I want to go back to the beginning of what brought you to Paris and where you're from.
What brought me to Paris? I usually make the joke in airplane, but that's not going to work too well. I had finished college studying to go to law school, took the LSAT exam and failed horribly, and realized that I wasn't going to become a lawyer. And I needed to figure out what to do with my life. And so what else do you do in that case but get on a plane with a one-way ticket to go spend a year or so in Paris to find yourself, to discover the poet within, and see where that leads you. And that's what I did.
And how many years has it been now that you've lived in Paris?
33 years.
So have you found yourself yet? Is it still a work in progress?
I mean, I think we find ourselves and then hopefully we lose ourselves again so we can find ourselves again. I think it's an ongoing cycle of the evolution and development of who we are and the different work that we bring into the world and the different relationships we're in. And, you know, hopefully there's an ongoing refreshing that's happening. That's not meant to be chaos or destabilizing, but keeps us fresh with who we are, keeps us growing and true to ourselves. And, you know, surely on the path of a creative life of variety and vitality and diversity and invention and reinvention and renaissance. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all valid points. We never truly find ourselves, do we? Like you said, we hopefully lose ourselves over and over again and just keep becoming and creating in our work and ourselves and our minds. And talk a little bit about your coaching, about the Alivefulness movement. I know this is a new thing that you're working on. It sounds fascinating. You're helping people awaken their openness to feel life, emotions, meaningfulness. Talk more about that. Yeah,
sure. I mean, I've felt for a long time in my life, even when I was little, I believe that, you know, we're often bullied by our brain. And I was a little kid who figured out that the only way to really save myself, protect myself, was actually to befriend all of these bullies at school and elsewhere. And it was kind of a metaphor for me about how I started to consider, you know, how to work with my brain, which sometimes was not my thinking, you know, was not really maybe supporting me was making me overly fearful or anxious or too cautious or just afraid of something maybe that I shouldn't really be afraid of. And I kind of started to feel that the way to get myself out of my head was through sensory stimulation and sensory activities that actually, once you start getting involved in them, they take you away from your thinking more. And so, on one side, you learn to focus on more what your sensory interaction is with the world, which is a sort of mindfulness that you're coming back to the present moment, and you're actually starting to observe and notice with all of our senses and the different intelligences that we have in our body beyond our brain, including our brain, but beyond our brain, just so that our interaction with the world is a more wholesome perspective. And it somewhat dilutes the bullying of potentially a brain that can be overactive in potentially a negative way for our lives. And so I started to really get a lot of relief and pleasure in my own life and on my own path to lean into the different sensorial activities of my life. And, for me, for a while, that was very much cooking. I would use cooking as the doorway to escaping my head. When you're in the kitchen, for example, and you're cooking using all of your senses, because cooking uses really all of your senses, and you're holding a very sharp knife and you're doing something with precision and making it beautiful, et cetera, you got to be really present to that. And so it demands really a presence that pulls you away from the very strong gravitational pull of the egoic, mind that either wants things to be perfect, wants to be controlling everything, is afraid of something going wrong, is somehow trying to protect you, but in a way that potentially is too much. And so I started to play in that area to realize how, for myself and with others, I could actually help people escape their thinking, escape their head, and really get out of your head and come to your senses. And in doing so, you get somewhat of a vacation, a moment that's a break, that's a pause. And if you're very attentive to that and you're very noticing, it's actually a way to actually regain a certain level of elevated consciousness, where you're able to just be with what is. And on one side, for me, suddenly I started to realize how magnificently colorful and creative and magical and meaningful life could be if I would get out of my head and kind of reconnect with the world around me and how I was interacting with it sensorially. I mean, this could be as simple as like walking down the streets of Paris, and instead of being lost in thought racing along, you suddenly take a deep breath and put your hand on your heart, and suddenly you're present. And if you lift your head and you start to look around and you ask yourself, where am I? What am I doing? Who is here? And you really start to lean on your senses and use your senses in a very proactive way, in a very deliberate way. And it starts to spread the tensions and the stress and things that are very much coming from up in the head through the body, and it dissipates things. And suddenly you feel like you're kind of back in a state of being yourself. You suddenly are not so tense and so caught up in things. And so, I started to develop a live event around that called Sensorial Experience Day, and wanted to bring people to their senses by distracting them so much from anything that would push them into their heads by, dancing, singing, and all the other things we do around food and many other types of embodied and sensorial activities, that people would be able to suddenly, feel this liberation. One peak experience that's outside of your dominating, rational, maybe left side of the mind that's kind of overly dominant. And people start to get a new balance within themselves. And they start to suddenly sense and feel and think and intuit things in a way that feels more like themselves, like they can feel themselves again. So I'm really bringing people back into the body intelligence through sensorial experiences. And yeah, and that's even extended now to some other types of activities, including acupressure boards, sati boards, if you know what those are, nails that you basically stand on, which are very nourishing and healing energetically. And at the same time, it really alivens you to come to the present moment. And it can even release, kind of emotional blockages because you actually let yourself, again, not push things up into the head, but you let things come actually down more into the body. So yeah, I'm somewhat on a mission, on a quest to bring people back to their bodies, which obviously involves their emotional body, their physical bodies, and the different intelligences that are there, so that we can live a life that's more pleasurable, purposeful, and productive. I would say, and in a lot of ways, powerful, because you feel like you're actually in the driver's seat. You actually start to become again the auteur. Great French word, the auteur of your life, where you're really, the writer director of your own vision of the experience of the world you're having, and you're not just letting what's being imposed upon us, that whether it's coming from the media or a boss or a work or a relationship or something, that you're actually finding a different balance in your own personal agency of how you experience life.
I think that is all fascinating and so needed, especially now more than ever. I mean, we always need this to reconnect with ourselves. And what you said about, doing activities that force us to be in the moment, like cooking or pottery or painting or whatever, you have to be completely in the moment to do those things. You can't be stuck in your mind, and brings you down to earth again. And talk a little bit about, you mentioned different intelligences. What did you mean by that?
Well, we obviously have our brain, which is doing its own work, but we also have, I would say, our heart intelligence and also our gut intelligence. There's sort of three areas I would say that we have that I see as sort of the main ones in our Western world, at least. And I think sometimes we're not really letting ourselves go beyond the first layer of how our brain interprets something and perceives something. And if we don't take our awareness and our attention and our focus and concentration to actually receive and interpret something from a different part of our intelligence, we're really constantly seeing things through a very thinking process and paradigm in a lot of ways. And it's just, for me, that's a little bit out of balance, particularly as we're in very much a period of the world where we've been pushed into the left side of the brain, which is very much a logical, rational kind of way of experiencing the world. So, on top of us being caught in the head, we're even caught on one side of the head a little bit too much in the other side, which is more around creativity and language and things of this nature. So yeah, the ability to kind of focus more from your heart. And this can happen through breathing exercises. This can happen through touch. Just you're putting your hands on your heart and then focusing your awareness, which is our most powerful tool, really. Focus our awareness on our breathing coming from our chest. And we suddenly start to realize that we can approach and interpret what we are experiencing in a different way. We feel about it instead of just think about it. And then we can sort of balance that with our thinking so that we come up with sort of a 1 + 1 = 10 kind of thing, right? And then, of course, we have our gut feeling and the instinct and this intuitional kind of way of experiencing the world, which this sort of intangible way of us being able to know when something just doesn't feel right. Something feels off to us. We're sort of sensing something that's rubbing us in the wrong way. Now, I think we need to balance the different intelligences to be able to come to a kind of balanced way of making decisions. But sometimes maybe one over the other is a better way of letting the heart lead versus letting the head lead in some examples. I mean, let's take, like in in romantic relationships, for example, I think that leading from the heart is probably 9 times out of 10 going to be a better response than leading from the head. We can't be so transactional in our relationships in life. We need to drop down into our heart and not let the sort of reducing, constantly wanting to optimize, maximize, compare, FOMO, all these things that the head is kind of doing to us that leads the like automatic defensive reaction that we have towards what's going on in our lives and what's happening. Whereas if we can take a step back by just dropping down into our body, into our stomach and into our chest, you can only feel sort of a relaxation that, wait, this isn't such an attack on me. I don't need to take this so personally. Let me respond versus reacting. And when we do that, we give ourselves the chance to just, drop into the heart and maybe into the gut and find a way to make sure that our response that our head wants to do is maybe the proportioned one. And again, I want to go back to the bullying example, that we're not letting the autopilot, subconsciously programmed reactions of our brain, which can come from, trauma from earlier periods of our life or any period of our life, or, anything that we've kind of programmed in ourselves as an automatic way to respond. So I think when we let ourselves use our various different intelligences, we can actually respond more with more wisdom to the life that is happening around us, whether we've chosen it or not.
And how do you tell the difference between, for example, your ego telling you something versus your heart telling yourself something versus your gut? Like sometimes it can all jumble together.
Yeah, it's true. It's a little bit of a party going on there sometimes, right?
Exactly.
I feel that it's oftentimes, we're in situations where we don't need to make a decision right away. And if you have the ability to give yourself a little bit of space before making a decision, potentially that can let you spend some time in contemplation with just a little bit deeper reflection, which I think brings more of the body into it. And you can really ask your different intelligences, what do you feel about this? What's your intuition about this? And just kind of sit with it. And if you're able to do that, a sort of truth can arise, at least a truth for each person, or a little bit more data, or a little bit of a different perspective that's perhaps more meaningful and more useful in the situation that's happening. I think it's just important to recognize when you're making a decision that's a reaction in a subconscious way, almost, where you've almost responded to someone's question or provocation in a way that's you're not even really even thinking about it, right? It's a subconscious thing. And if you can already start to catch yourself in responses and responding in ways that you don't want to be, there you can already start to then dip more into your heart, dip more into your gut. And I think there the confusion is a little bit less chaotic. I think actually the confusion often comes from just a misbalance. I think oftentimes either it's really the head or potentially it's very, very much the heart. We kind of maybe sometimes go between extremes, and it depends on the situation. But it's definitely not a science to be able to do that. But the more that you can balance the different areas by touching yourself, by breathing into it, by questioning them, by bringing them into the conversation, the better you can actually make a more informed decision given who you are and given what you want to get out of or give into a situation.
Yeah. And I think that, just taking a pause, like you said, someone once said to me, with our emotions, imagine yourself as the conductor of an orchestra and all your emotions are playing the different instruments. And you're like, okay, sadness or violin. Okay, it's your turn. You're doing your thing, but just kind of like to watch it, to listen, but not like act on it. Just let it do its thing. And you're still in control, which made a lot of sense to me. I like that metaphor, the orchestra. Yeah. Our emotions.
And talk about how we store emotional energy.
Well, everything that happens in our lives, we store, somewhere inside of us. And what is kind of unfortunate is if it's either suppressed, repressed, we've somehow blocked it inside of us somewhere, perhaps because it was something that we didn't want or was unpleasant or forced upon us, or we did something we really didn't want and we didn't express ourselves. And like, there's all these sort of things that we're cramping and pushing down. And if we're not finding ways to liberate that energy, and we just continue taking it in, so we're kind of we're kind of just piling on stuff inside of ourselves. After a while, things are so buried that it's hard to even sense them or feel them or know them. And so it can be very useful to find ways that you're able to release emotional trapped energy, because these things are blocking us actually from living really in a way that would be, more peaceful and potentially even more powerful and more true to ourselves. And so there are various ways to sort of access your emotional body and release them. Laughter is an incredible one. Crying is an incredible one. There are different sort of purging activities and different types of ceremonies that you can actually attend to sort of access these parts of ourselves. And I almost want to say it's not so much what it's about. It's more about, can you start to develop the ability to not block things and let them more flow through you and not be so attached to them and gripping on them, and be a little bit more gentle with them and compassionate and just sort of holding space for them to come in and go through you. And this again brings us back to just the body's ability and the body's memory for, traumatic and troubling and challenging things that have marked us in our life that we don't want to experience again. And so if we find these ways, different methodologies to actually go back into that feeling and just hold the space for it very lovingly and courageously, but not confrontational and not trying to flee it and not trying to force it, but just kind of be with it, we can actually start to expand our ability to live with certain equanimity vis-a-vis our emotions and our reactions. But these things take some time to release. Some people are doing lots of talk therapy to work through their lives, which I think takes a long time. I think embodiment and somatic healing today is something that's coming a lot to the forefront. These are beautiful ways to actually get more into your body through, for example, breathing, which is a very powerful tool that can get into these places that have been stuck and find a way to open them up and release them just through very intensive breathing activities. The acupressure boards are another way to push us to this limit of almost, having to decipher between pain and suffering. And so as you start to go more into that realm, I think we start to get to know it better. We start to accept it better. We start to open it better because we feel more confident and comfortable and courageous, and realize that it's a beautiful thing to live as a sensitive, open person who wants to feel all the life and explore the different sensorial and magical experiences we can have, and also to face the really hard and tough things that we have to face through life. So it's not just about closing down the head. It's about how can we open up the body and strengthen that through, gradual exposure, go back and explore it a little, open ourselves to stretching at an emotional level. And you start to get better at that, and you start to increase the intelligence that's there versus the head, and the balance starts to work itself out, and you start to find a better way for all of that to get along together and work together as it's all intended to.
So, what are some things that people could do today to reconnect with their emotions, with their bodies? Like, kind of like a 101 for dummies. We're learning how to do this. Like, what are like your top 3 tips if somebody wants to get started today?
I would highly recommend going to a breathing session, for example, like a somatic breathing session, sort of a 1 hour, 1.5 hour, deep in and out of the mouth, breathing to rhythmic music, usually guided by somebody who is there to hold space for you and to be there for you if things get a little bit challenging. And that really opens up a lot. That's extremely powerful medicine. Is certainly one thing. Going out and going dancing for like 8 hours, which is a hard thing to do. But if you could go out and go dancing again, like all this physical exertion to, soften the head so you can actually dip down into the emotions is a very useful kind of thing. Meditating can be good, but I would suggest that you have to really fine tune your concentration to be able to focus on, for example, your breathing coming in and out of your heart and in and out of your belly, and to really allow yourself the time to be with that part of yourself. And you'll notice stuff coming up that maybe you haven't thought about for a really long time, or something that's constantly coming in that you've been like turning your head away from suddenly keeps coming up, and you start to realize, hey, I really want to take a closer look at this. So yeah, I would say those three are a few of the options.
I like it. The 8 hours of dancing, you got to be pretty fit for that one.
Well, you got to go to
Yeah, I mean, we just had Fête de la Musique. That could have been the perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Spend a whole night out. No, it's just great. When you get to that level of sort of exhaustion, like good exhaustion, it's a beautiful space if you use it then intentionally to actually, go to those places that you're feeling a little bit murky about or curious about, or that you've been hiding from. If you can go there and just gently, focus your awareness there. But it helps when you've done a lot of breathing. It helps when your body's been a bit fatigued, and it helps when you're sitting quiet and calmly and peacefully.
And talk about some of the best resources for your creative journey. What are some of the resources that have helped you?
Some of the resources that have helped me the most. I mean, for a long time, I think cooking was really one of my greatest creative and sensorial outlets. And it was the magical way to actually allow me to get out of my head and be in a space of creativity, of creating love, of creating magic and beauty, and getting my hands dirty and doing the imperfect things and striving to really be present and enjoy the process. And so I really think cooking is an undervalued creativity vehicle, and also a sort of spiritual path to reconnect to yourself, and potentially, if you're cooking with others, with them also. We've delegated way too much to the outside world, where there's takeout and there's going out every single night, and these types of things. And on the other side, we've lost a little bit of the passion and the creativity and perhaps the resourcefulness to actually want to cook beautiful things and create and use that moment as like a dopamine creator, right? So I think there's a lot to be said about cooking as a space, just as sort of like an everyday kind of thing. I can't emphasize enough curiosity to go to the edges of what you're afraid of, and to face that. I don't mean to do that recklessly, but there are many areas in our life. If you just did a list of the 10 things that you're that you're most afraid of either happening in your life or experiencing, and see if you can't start to approach some of those. I mean, it could go from having a conversation with your parents to tell them that, you have a different sexual preference or whatever, or it could be, wanting to go skydiving because you've always felt like that's something that, scares the bejeebus out of you, which was kind of my case up until a few months ago. So, going towards the things that scare you can open you to more expansion into what you're capable of handling, and makes you feel in a lot of ways stronger and more expansive to take on life. Even again, to go back to an eating metaphor, and this is a little bit tricky depending on where you live, I guess, but still to have a very open palate to taste a lot of different kinds of food, to get lots of different textures and flavors. And, you're constantly sort of opening up the palette of the rainbow of life, whereas life is almost trying to force us into living sort of a black and white existence of having preferences. And it's like, well, okay, we all have our preferences, but let's open up more to the variety of what we can actually experience, and then use that metaphor for everything that we're experiencing in life, in our work life, in our personal life, in our sex life, in our relational life, whatever it is, to be able to say, hey, I could actually be way more creative, resourceful here if I got more curious, if I asked more questions, if I didn't just assume. So that type of stuff I think has been very, very useful. I've kind of become a fan in some ways over the years of voluntary deprivation. And this could be, 2-3 day water fasting. This could be taking, only cold showers when you have the choice to take also hot showers, which, by the way, is very healthy to do that. Consult your doctor first, but okay. Even deprivation with social media, or, Netflix, or something where you're actually choosing to not experience what you sort of automatically usually would, so that you can kind of refresh and reboot your desires and your hunger and your appreciation and gratitude for hot water, for the beautiful food that's around you that you haven't eaten in 3 days. And you suddenly realize kind of how spoiled we are, and we get out of a state of being potentially a little bit jaded or bored, and bring some powerful variety into our life. Again, another kind of example, cooking world. Some people would say when people come over to your house for a dinner party, cook something that you always cook that you're really good at so that you don't screw it up, et cetera. I'm like, no, cook something you've never done. That's pretty risky, where you're out on the edge, and use everyday life once again to help stretch yourself and not be afraid of what might happen, and then be very present to what you're doing when you're in the process of creating. And most likely you'll do something that's beautiful and magical. And so, it's just to constantly find ways to stretch out of our comfort zone, and not always to do things the way that we always have, is really, really, really powerful way also. And just what I call a lifefulness, which is a certain version of mindfulness. So just, a lifefulness is kind of another version of mindfulness, or mindful living, let's call it. It's just that I want to feel like, life has passion and panache and zest and flavor and variety and, challenges and everything, but to be open to be able to experience all of that. And we need to be really present to and conscious to the way that we're living and the way that we're being, and really already just to start recognizing and noticing how we are behaving, and how we choose to spend our time, and the choices we make to kind of take a step back to do that. And again, lean on our senses, even look around and suddenly realize, wow, I do live in a really beautiful home. Wow, the woman or the man that I've fallen in love with, 10 years ago, gosh, I remember why I fell in love with them, and I still sense that in them. I can appreciate that. And then you start to value again and refresh that which you were connected to before and that meant something to you and that was empowering. And so you're starting to acknowledge that again, and it's coming back into your presence of being and the way you're going to treat and behave this person or behave in the world with your work, for example. And so you're expressing this appreciation, and suddenly you're verbalizing it and you're self-expressing it more and you're showing it more, and suddenly you're like in this abundance loop of just loving the life you're leading and leading a life you're loving. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about just everyday life, using it more as the spiritual teacher, coming to your senses and noticing and observing beauty and finding what there is to appreciate and value and give meaning to for the people and the experiences and the work that you're involved in. Those are amazing. And I'll just add one more, which is travel. Travel is a phenomenal teacher. And I highly recommend, if you live a very comfortable life, when you go on holiday, do the opposite. Go on a hard trekking, camping trip. If you live in a very comfortable home in a warm place, try and choose opportunities for yourself, which again will allow you to experience a different version of what life is, and not just be kind of in a like-mindedness all the time with our choices. Again, I go back to the metaphor between the head, the heart, and the gut. I mean, let's try and live and experience things from different places of ourselves, and go to where things are foreign and maybe a little bit scary and a little bit edgy for you, and we start to realize that the world has so many opportunities and so many experiences we can have. And we just need to sometimes get out of our own little rut, the sort of Groundhog's Day of way of looking at life. So choose an unusual destination. Go do something that you would probably never do. Go travel to Tibet and take a gong course or whatever, right? Whatever it is for you. Only you can know what it would be as a stretch to do that. But mix that with going to the family country house, all the time. And I think you give yourself a broader range of what you can experience and who you can be in life.
I think that is a beautiful note to end on. And where can people connect with you, learn about your work, hire you, and connect?
Yeah, the best place is Instagram @TheSensorialGuy. @TheSensorialGuy.
Perfect. Well, we'll share that in the show notes along with your website. And thanks so much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Crystal.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.